45%. It's only fair.
What? No! This is my money! You owe us! Give it here!
Hand it over!
The way they didn't even say congratulations. They didn't ask how I felt. They didn't ask if I was happy. They didn't ask what it took to get there. They asked one question. How much are they paying you? I should have recognized that moment for what it was. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't excitement. It was calculation. Looking back now, I realize that my new job didn't change my life because of the money. It changed my life because it revealed who the people closest to me really were. And once the truth came out, there was no going back. My name is Daniel. I'm 28 years old, and until 6 months ago, I honestly believed my parents wanted nothing more than to see me succeed. Growing up, we weren't poor enough to beg, but we weren't comfortable either. Every bill felt like an emergency. Every school term came with arguments about tuition. Every Christmas depended on whether Dad had enough overtime. Mom often reminded us how much she sacrificed. Dad reminded us even more. If your mother and I hadn't worked ourselves to bone, he'd say, none of you would have a future. I believed him. Every word. I never complained. While my classmates spent weekends at parties, I stocked supermarket shelves. When they traveled during holidays, I delivered food on my motorcycle to save money. I graduated with student loans, a second-hand laptop that overheated every 20 minutes, and a promise to myself that one day, my parents would never have to worry about money again. That dream became my fuel. Every rejection email pushed me harder. Every failed interview taught me something new. There were mornings I left my apartment before sunrise and came home after midnight. Friends stopped inviting me out because they already knew my answer. I have to work. It became my entire life. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed. I was sitting in a crowded cafe, refreshing my email every few minutes. I just finished my third interview with one of the biggest engineering firms in the country. I wasn't expecting much. They had interviewed dozens of candidates. Some had master's degrees. Others had years more experience than I did. Then my phone vibrated. An email. The subject line read, offer of employment. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I opened the email twice because I was convinced I had imagined it. I hadn't. I got the job. Not only did I get the job, the salary was almost 3 times what I'd been earning. I stared at the screen. Read it again. Then again. People around me probably thought I'd won the lottery. In a way, I had. I called my best friend, Marcus. He answered on the first ring. You got it, didn't you? I laughed so hard I nearly cried. I got it. I knew you would. For almost 10 minutes, we celebrated over the phone. He congratulated me. He reminded me how hard I'd worked. He told me he was proud of me. Those 3 words. I'm proud of you. I hadn't heard them from my parents in years. Still, I couldn't wait to tell them. I imagined Mom crying. Dad giving me one of those awkward shoulder pats he reserved for special occasions. Maybe, just maybe, we'd all feel like the years of struggle had finally been worth something. So I drove straight to my parents' house. Mom opened the door. She looked surprised. Daniel, I've got news. Dad looked up from the television. What happened? I smiled so wide my face hurt. I got the job. Mom smiled politely. Oh. Dad muted the television. What company? I told him. He nodded once. Then he leaned forward in his chair. So, there was a brief silence. How much are they paying you? That was it. No congratulations. No hug. No smile. No, we're proud of you. Just numbers. I laughed awkwardly. I start next month. Dad repeated himself. No. How much? Something inside me hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe instinct was trying to warn me, but they were my parents. Why would I hide it? So I told them. The room became strangely quiet. Mom and Dad looked at each other, not with surprise, not with joy, with understanding, like 2 people silently confirming something they'd already discussed. Dad slowly leaned back. Mom folded her hands in her lap. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, Dad smiled. It wasn't a smile I'd hoped to see. It was a smile of someone who had just solved a financial problem. Good, he said. That means we can finally have a conversation. I frowned. What conversation? Mom spoke gently. Sit down, Daniel. The warmth in her voice didn't comfort me. It made me nervous. I sat. Dad rested both elbows on his knees. You know your mother, and I invested everything in raising you. I nodded. Of course. We sacrificed vacations. Yes. We worked overtime. I know. We paid school fees. I've always appreciated that. Dad smiled again. Good. Then you'll understand. I felt my stomach tighten. Understand what? He looked me directly in the eye. From your first paycheck onward. He paused just long enough for my heartbeat to quicken. 45% of your salary belongs to this family. I honestly thought he was joking. I laughed. Neither of them did. The silence that followed told me everything. My smile disappeared. Dad, you can't be serious. We're completely serious. Mom nodded. It's only fair. I stared at both of them, waiting for someone to smile. No one did. And in that moment, I realized the celebration I'd imagined on the drive over had never existed. To them, my new job wasn't the beginning of my future. It was the beginning of their paycheck. I wish I could tell you, I stood up that day, looked my father in the eyes, and immediately told him no. I didn't, because when the people asking for something are the same people who raised you, the word no doesn't come easily. Instead, I just sat there, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. Dad broke the silence first. You've gone quiet. I'm just trying to understand. Mom smiled gently, the same smile she used whenever she wanted me to agree with something without questioning it. There's nothing difficult to understand, Daniel. We're your parents. We took care of you for 28 years. Dad nodded. You wouldn't even have this job if it weren't for us. I swallowed. I know everything you've done for me. So why are we even discussing this? He replied. My stomach tightened. I just wasn't expecting. 45%? Mom finished. Exactly. Dad leaned back comfortably. It's not as much as you think. You'll still have more money than you've ever had. I stared at the floor. It wasn't the percentage. It was the assumption. Not, would you help us? Not, can we count on you if we need anything? They had already decided. My salary had been divided before I'd earned a single paycheck. Dad reached for a notepad on the coffee table. I've actually done the calculations. My heart sank. Calculations? He slid the paper toward me. Every month. 45%. Written neatly beside my expected salary. Below it, a list. House renovation. New SUV. Medical savings. Support for your younger brother. Community donations. Emergency fund. I looked at him. You already plan how to spend it? Dad frowned as though I'd asked a foolish question. Of course. Why wouldn't we? I forced a laugh. I haven't even signed the final employment documents yet. You will? His confidence unsettled me. And if something changes? Mom waved her hand dismissively. It won't. Then Dad said something that made the room feel colder. Your salary belongs to the family before it belongs to you. I looked at him. Surely he didn't mean that literally. I work for this. And who worked so you could work? He answered immediately. Silence. Every answer I thought of sounded disrespectful. Every objection felt like betrayal. So instead, I changed the subject. When do I start? Dad smiled. Monday. Good. That gives us enough time. Enough time for what? Mom stood. We're having dinner Saturday. I smiled. A celebration? She hesitated. You could call it that. Saturday arrived. I bought a cake. 2 bottles of sparkling juice. Flowers for Mom. It sounds foolish now, but I still believe we were celebrating. As I parked outside the house, I noticed far more cars than usual. My uncle's truck, my aunt's SUV, my cousin's sedan. Even my grandmother's driver was outside. I frowned. What is everyone doing here? Inside, the house was full. Uncles, aunts, cousins, neighbors I'd known since childhood. Everyone smiled when they saw me. There he is, our millionaire. Look who's finally made it. People hugged me, shook my hand, patted my back. For a moment, I relaxed. Maybe I'd misunderstood my parents. Maybe this really was just a family celebration. Then my younger brother, Eric, walked over with the widest grin I'd ever seen. Congratulations. Thanks. I can't wait. For what? He laughed. Dad says everything is about to change. What does that mean? You'll see. A strange feeling settled over me again. Dad tapped a spoon against a glass. The room became quiet. He stood in the center of the living room, like a man about to deliver an important announcement. My family, everyone looked toward him. Today is a proud day. People applauded. Our son Daniel has accepted a wonderful new position. More applause. I smiled politely. Then Dad continued. As many of you already know, I frowned. Already know? Daniel has agreed to contribute 45% of his monthly salary to support this family. The room erupted in applause. My smile disappeared. I looked around. People were clapping, cheering, congratulating my parents. Not me. My aunt shouted, "That's how children should behave." Someone else said, "God will bless him for honoring his parents." Another voice added, "Finally, your sacrifices have paid off." I turned toward Dad. My heart was pounding. I whispered, "I never agreed to that." He didn't even look at me. Instead, he kept speaking to everyone else. Our family believes success should be shared. More applause. Mom stood beside him, smiling proudly, as though the decision had already been finalized. My uncle raised his glass. To Daniel. Everyone lifted their drinks. To Daniel. And to generous children. Laughter filled the room. I wasn't celebrating anymore. I was trapped. Dad finally turned toward me. "Daniel." Every eye in the room shifted to me. "Tell everyone how happy you are to help your family." The entire house became silent. Dozens of faces stared at me, waiting, expecting, judging. I looked at my parents, then at my relatives, then back at the paper Dad had conveniently placed on the coffee table. For the first time in my life, I realized this had never been a conversation. It had been an announcement, and they expected me to smile through it. I slowly stood from my chair, took a deep breath, looked directly at my father. Then I opened my mouth. The first word I said made every smile in the room disappear. No. The room went so quiet. I could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway. Tick, tick, tick. Every face was turned toward me. Some looked confused. Others looked offended. My father looked insulted. He stared at me as if I just embarrassed him in front of the entire family. "What did you say?" His voice was calm. Too calm. I didn't look away. I said no. My mother laughed nervously. "Oh, Daniel." She reached for my arm. "Don't joke like that." I gently stepped back. "I'm not joking." The smile disappeared from her face. Dad slowly set his glass down on the coffee table. "You've embarrassed us enough." "I haven't embarrassed anyone." "Then tell everyone you misspoke." I shook my head. I never agreed to give anyone 45% of my salary. Murmurs spread through the living room. People looked at one another. My aunt frowned. "But your father said." I know what he said. I kept my voice calm. But he never asked me. He decided for me. That sentence changed the atmosphere. The celebration was over. Now, it felt like a courtroom. My uncle crossed his arms. "So you're refusing to help your parents?" I didn't say that. "You just did." "No." I said I'm refusing to let someone else control my income. Dad slammed his hand on the coffee table. "The money exists because of us. It exists because I worked for it. You wouldn't have worked if we hadn't raised you. And every parent raises their children." The words escaped before I could soften them. The room exploded. People began talking over each other. "So children owe their parents nothing now. This generation has no respect. He's become proud already. The money has entered his head." My younger brother, Eric, stood up. I knew this would happen. He pointed directly at me. The moment he started earning real money, he forgot where he came from. I looked at him in disbelief. "Eric, I've helped pay your school fees for 3 years. He froze. So, don't stand there and pretend I've never supported this family. The room became quiet again. He hadn't expected me to say that. Neither had anyone else. I looked around the room. You all think this is the first time my family has asked me for money. It isn't. When Dad's business struggled, I helped. When Mom needed surgery, I paid what insurance didn't cover. When Eric couldn't register for his final semester, I transferred the money the same day. I looked at my aunt. When Uncle James was hospitalized, who do you think paid for those medications? She lowered her eyes. You all call me selfish today. But none of you were there on the nights I skipped meals because I'd already sent my savings home. Nobody answered. Dad finally spoke. That's what family does. I nodded slowly. Exactly. Family helps. It doesn't issue invoices. His jaw tightened. I continued. I never once kept score. I never asked for repayment. I never stood in front of relatives announcing how much I'd given. I looked around the room. But today, you've turned my success into a public obligation. My grandmother, who had remained silent until now, cleared her throat. Daniel. I turned toward her. Do you intend to abandon your parents? The question hurt, because it assumed only two possibilities. Complete obedience or abandonment. No, Grandma, I'll never abandon them. But helping someone should come from love, not from pressure. Dad laughed bitterly. Pressure? You call this pressure? I nodded. You announced a financial arrangement without asking me, in front of everyone. So that saying no would make me look like the bad person. Nobody denied it, because everyone knew it was true. Mom suddenly began crying, softly at first, then louder. I knew this job would take him away from us. Several relatives immediately surrounded her. There, you did your best. This isn't your fault. Watching them comfort her, while I stood there alone, felt surreal. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't insulted anyone. I'd simply said no. Yet, somehow, I had become the villain. Dad pointed toward the front door. If you walk out today, his voice echoed through the room. Don't expect to come back asking for anything. I stared at him. I've never asked you for anything as an adult. His face reddened. You'll regret this. I hope not. I picked up the cake I'd brought. Nobody stopped me. I looked at it for a second, then quietly placed it on the dining table. I brought this because I thought we were celebrating together. My voice almost broke. I didn't realize I was attending a meeting about my paycheck. Without another word, I walked toward the front door. Behind me, no one called my name. No one said, "Wait." No one said, "Let's talk." The only sound I heard was my father's voice. If you leave now, don't expect this family to treat you like a son. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. Without turning around, I answered quietly, I've spent my whole life trying to be a good son. I just realized today that being a good son and being an obedient wallet aren't the same thing. Then I opened the door and walked away. The next morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mom, Dad, Eric, my aunt, my uncle, cousins, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. I ignored every call. Then the text messages started. You're breaking your mother's heart. Honor your father and mother. God blesses obedient children. Money shouldn't divide family. One message stood out. It came from my cousin, Sarah. Can we meet? Just you and me. Sarah had always been honest. If anyone wanted the truth, it would be her. That afternoon, we met at a quiet coffee shop. She looked uncomfortable. I almost didn't come. Why? Because if your parents find out, they'll be angry. She nodded. After a long silence, she leaned closer. I need to tell you something. What is it? She looked around to make sure nobody was listening. This wasn't Dad's idea alone. I frowned. What do you mean? They've been planning this for months. My heart sank. Months. She nodded. I overheard your parents talking at Grandma's birthday. They already knew you were interviewing for bigger jobs. So, they started making plans. What kind of plans? Sarah took a deep breath. Your father promised Uncle James he'd finally renovate the house. He told Eric he'd buy him a brand new SUV. He even promised Mom they'd take the international vacation she'd always wanted. I stared at her, but I hadn't even gotten the job. I know. She looked genuinely sorry. They weren't hoping you'd succeed. They were budgeting with your future salary. I couldn't speak. Sarah reached into her handbag. I probably shouldn't have this. She slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. I opened it. It was handwritten. At the top, one sentence. Daniel's monthly salary allocation. Below it, 45%. Every naira already assigned to someone else. House renovation. SUV. Vacation. Eric's business investment. Church donations. Family reputation. Not one line mentioned Daniel. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Then I folded it carefully, placed it back on the table, and for the first time, I stopped feeling guilty. Because this had never been about helping family. It had been about ownership. They didn't just want part of my income. They believed they were entitled to it. As Sarah stood to leave, she looked at me with sadness. Daniel, I think they're coming to your apartment tonight. I frowned. What? They're bringing some of the elders. They believe if enough people pressure you, you'll finally give in. I looked out through the coffee shop window. The peaceful afternoon suddenly felt much darker. If they were willing to bring the entire family to my doorstep, I knew one thing. The real battle hadn't even started. I barely slept that night. Sarah's warning kept replaying in my head. They're bringing some of the elders. I wasn't afraid of an argument. I was afraid of what my family had become. Around 7 o'clock that evening, the doorbell rang. Then again, and again, I looked through the peephole. Dad, Mom, Eric, my uncle, 2 church elders, and my grandmother. I opened the door just enough to step outside before anyone could walk into my apartment. Dad folded his arms. We need to settle this. I've already made my position clear. No, he replied. You've made your emotions clear. We're here to help you make the right decision. One of the elders smiled politely. Son, families sometimes disagree. But unity is more important than money. I nodded respectfully. I agree. So, let's solve the real problem. Dad looked satisfied. Good. I reached into my pocket. I prepared something. I handed everyone a printed envelope. Each person opened it. Inside was a simple document. The first page listed every financial transfer I had made to my family over the past 6 years. Dates, amounts, hospital bills, school fees, rent assistance, emergency repairs, groceries, funeral contributions, business support. Every transfer was backed by bank receipts. The second page showed one final number. Total financial support, $86,430. Silence. Absolute silence. My uncle slowly lowered the papers. You kept records? I never planned to use them. I only started organizing them after Dad announced my salary to everyone. I turned to my father. You told everyone I had never sacrificed for this family. I wanted everyone to know the truth. Mom stared at the pages with trembling hands. I didn't know it was this much. I smiled sadly, because I never reminded you. I gave because I loved you, not because I wanted applause. The church elder quietly cleared his throat. He looked toward my father. Brother, were these contributions voluntary? Dad hesitated. Yes. Did Daniel ever refuse genuine emergencies? No. Were you in financial danger when you requested 45%? Dad looked away. No. The elder asked one final question. So, why exactly 45%? No answer came, because there wasn't one. At least, not one that sounded honorable. Eric suddenly spoke. That's not the point. I looked at him. It is the point. He crossed his arms. You earn more now, so you should do more. I already planned to. Everyone looked at me. I was going to help Mom and Dad. I planned to pay off their mortgage. I wanted to replace Dad's old car. I even wanted to surprise them with a vacation for their anniversary. Mom's eyes filled with tears. You did? I nodded, but I wanted it to come from gratitude, not obligation. Dad looked stunned. You never told us. Because surprises stop being surprises once someone sends you an invoice. No one spoke. The weight of those words settled over everyone. After several long moments, Dad quietly folded the papers. For the first time since all this began, his voice was soft. I thought... He paused. I thought success would change you. I looked at him. It did. It taught me that boundaries aren't disrespect. They're necessary. He lowered his head, and I let fear make me greedy. Mom reached for my hand. I'm sorry. I was so afraid of struggling again. I forgot you were our son before you were a salary. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I forgot to congratulate you. That sentence broke something inside me, because that was all I wanted from the beginning. Not money, not praise. Just, we're proud of you. Dad slowly stepped forward. His eyes were red. I should have hugged you. I should have told you how proud I was. Instead, I started calculating. He extended his hand, then stopped. I don't deserve forgiveness. I looked at his hand, then pulled him into a hug. For several seconds, neither of us said a word. My mother joined us. Even my grandmother wiped tears from her eyes. Eric remained silent. Eventually, he looked at me. I owe you an apology, too. You helped me more than anyone. I acted like you owe me even more. I nodded. I forgive you. But things have to change. He agreed. They will. Over the following months, our family slowly rebuilt what entitlement had nearly destroyed. Dad found part-time consulting work instead of depending on me. Eric got a job before trying another business. Mom started managing the household budget with far more care. Whenever they genuinely needed help, they asked. They no longer demanded. And whenever I could help, I did. Not because I had to, because I wanted to. The greatest surprise came 6 months later. It was my birthday. My parents invited me over for dinner. As I walked into the house, I noticed only immediate family was there. No speeches, no announcements, no pressure, just dinner. After dessert, Dad stood. For a moment, I felt nervous. Then he smiled. A different smile. The kind I'd been hoping to see all along. He lifted a small gift box. Inside was an old framed photograph. It showed me on my first day of elementary school, standing between my parents. All three of us smiling. On the back, Dad had written one sentence. We should have said this sooner. We're proud of you. Not because of your salary, but because of the man you become. I couldn't hold back the tears. Neither could they. Looking back now, people often ask if refusing my parents' demand was the hardest decision I've ever made. It wasn't. The hardest part was accepting that the people I love could be wrong. But sometimes, loving your family doesn't mean saying yes to everything they ask. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to let guilt replace respect. Because generosity, given freely, strengthens relationships. Money demanded through entitlement destroys them. My parents tried to control my new salary. Instead, they learned that love cannot be measured by a percentage. And that lesson changed all of us far more than any paycheck ever could.